Hi, everybody. I'm there. Yes, I am there. Sorry, I was looking for something, and do you think I can find it? Oh, well, it is what it is. Hello, Tomalee. So glad you could join today because we're going to do part 2 of our love letter album. And of course, this is the collection. Gorgeous roses, pinks, grays, some barnwood there in different colors. It's absolutely stunning. So this is what we're making the project with. This is the cover of the finished project. I did a walkthrough at the very beginning of part 1, so I'm not going to do another walkthrough today, but I may refer to this as we are finishing off the flips and the flaps and bring it back up for you guys to see. What else can I tell you? I guess that's about it. We're going to get started. Hello, Caroline. Hello, Jerry. Nice that you could join today. So I'm going to bring in my project and we're going to get rolling here so that we aren't taking all afternoon to get this completed, because I know you guys have busy lives and lots of things that you want to be doing on a Friday afternoon. But thanks for spending part of it with me. So let me move this out of the way. And I did put into the guides over on Scrapbookers, so the Facebook group called, hi Tina, Scrapbookers of Country Craft Creations. In guide 18, you'll find this cutting guide. It's a PDF in there, and you'll find part 1. I was really good. I managed to get it all in, so that's always a good thing when I can manage that kind of thing, because sometimes I forget. I get carried away, get on to other things. So what we managed to get done last week is we got our cover, or our actual album constructed, and we got our pages in. So you can go back and refer to that if you need to. And the measurements I gave all last week for all of this, they're also in this cutting guide. And yeah, so let's get rolling, and we'll start with, so I tend to call things front and back, and I refer to them as 1, 2, 3, 4 when I'm doing a cutting guide. So that's my math, and that's how I've done things. And oh, I would never, Tina, I would never tell anybody that. That is our secret, or it's just our little thing that we know about. So let's move on. I did, in the original, I used the pink seam binding to tie everything, or in some places to tie things closed instead of using magnets. In the one I'm going to create now, I'm going to use this kind of browny gold. I think it's light brown. Can't remember which it is. I should have written it down. Now I forget. But of course, I'm sure you guys all know how to get it crinkly. Take it into the bathroom, take it to the kitchen, run the water over your length, roll it into a ball, and leave it. Go to it the next day, open up the ball, let it dry the rest of the way, and voila, you've got this beautiful crinkled thing going on. So I'm going to keep this handy because I am going to need it. And yes, so let's get rolling. So I've got all my pieces over here on the side. And this is page 1 front. And I'll give you the measurements. And if you stick around to the very end, I'm going to show you what I'm working on. I won't have a live next Friday, but I'm hoping to have a live the following Friday. Okay? Because next Friday, I'm going to be in Utah. All right, so we're just going to move the book out of our way for a second so we can talk about measurements. So we have a flap that measures 5 by 8, and on the 8-inch side, I scored it 1/2 inch. And then there are 2 other flaps. These flaps both have the same measurements. They are 5.5 by 5.5. So pick your 5.5 and score it 1/2 inch on both of them. So those are our pieces. So let's fold on those score lines. And we're going to burnish on those score lines. Get this all done first. And I do believe, yes, I did. I rounded my corners for this. So I'll just do my rounding now while they're not. Oh, you know what? It's going to be so nice, Tomalee. It's not all, there's some stuff I have to do, but you know, for the most part, it'll be fun. So I'm just going to round the corners. And on our longer one. And of course, rounding is a choice. This is my We Are Memory Keepers Crocodile Corner Chomper, and I'm using the 3/8 for this project today. All right, so I'm going to put it up here because I dropped one of these on the floor and I broke off a wing and I need to replace it. And every time I look at the price of the new ones, I cringe. So, but I'll find one on sale. It'll happen. I have another backup one that I've been using and it works quite well. So that's probably a good thing. So if you hear any noises, that would be my husband outside. He's moving a wood pile. And for those of you, I don't know if I said anything on here. So he broke his 5th metatarsal just before Christmas. And he's still in his air boot. And yes, he's moving wood, but he's bored to tears. So I got to kind of cave a little, you know. It's okay. He'll be fine. He doesn't overdo it. So that's the most important thing. All right. So I'm not going to miter my 1/2-inch tabs because they're not going from one side of the page to the other side of the page. So I'm just going to add my adhesive, and I am using the Art Glitter Glue or the Dries Clear Art Glitter Glue, I guess is its full and proper name. All right. And I'm just going to line this up. Hello, Alice. So glad you could join us today. So I'm just centering it side to side. It's funny. It looks dark and I got all my lights on. Oh, well, I think it's fine. It's probably, oh, it's fine. When I get over in the other light, it's because it's so bright in here today. When I'm looking at what's recording at my end, I was thinking, oh, I don't have all my lights on. And then I looked and went, yeah, I got all my lights on. What's the issue here? So there we go. Just making sure. And then these 2 flaps, one is going to go on the left side of this flip up, and the other one is going to go on the right side of that flip up. Just making sure. I am not going to miter these 1/2-inch tabs either because there's no need to, because again, they are not going top to bottom. And I am just going to start with one. And I'm going to sort of center it. And again, you could almost do anything you wanted with these flaps. You could put one up here, like, you know, just have it down a little bit from the top. And then you could take your other one and just have it up a little ways from the bottom if you wanted to, you know, give a little bit different look. I am going to center mine because that's what I decided I was going to do on this project. And again, I'm going to take my Dries Clear Art Glitter. Anybody got any exciting plans? And I'm just making sure that it's square, which it is. Just want it over just a little bit. It's bugging me. Open, burnish. And once you have one of your flaps down, the second flap is a lot easier to position because you use your first flap to line up your second flap. So something like that. So we're going to put some You know what, Caroline? That sometimes happens with my Facebook feed. I don't know why it does that, but it can get very frustrating when it does. There's probably a legitimate reason for it. So again, I'm using the flap that I put on the left-hand side as my guide for my flap that I'm going to be putting on the right-hand side. But before I actually glue it, I want to just, that's the nice thing about using the glue. It gives you a couple of seconds to position it. And I'm just going to do that. Making sure, yeah, I'm hanging over a little bit here, so I need to readjust. So I'll show you what I was looking at. I was just making sure that I wasn't hanging over this flap that I have across the top. And I'm not now, so that makes me happy. So I'll give it a good burnish. Now, you could use some seam binding here for your closure. I'm going to use just one large magnet. Oh, there you go. Yes, yes. We're not I think it's football, right? We're not football people. I know how awful of us in this house. My husband's never really been a big sports dude, so, you know, it's just how it is. Yes, Caroline, it's kind of nice to have the two options. And we're just going to remove. So I'm going to put one of my magnets in the middle. And you could, if you wanted to, put it right on the base page. I don't feel I need to, because with the two flaps here, my base page is being held down. So I didn't put the magnet, I just left it here. Because sometimes when you're working through multiple layers, what you end up happening is once you get the pattern paper on, then your magnets aren't holding, and that's frustrating. Now, don't ask me where I learned my little trick. Hello, Sheila. Nice that you could join us today. Someplace on my journey, I learned to always put a little piece of dry adhesive over my magnet so I don't lose it. Don't ask me where, can't give credit, but it's just my little thing. Whether it's necessary or not, I think it's, again, a personal choice. And then, so all I did is I took this magnet, I let it adhere to the magnet. So this is my flap on the right side. I put that right flap down. I let this magnet adhere to the magnet that was down here, peeled off the adhesive backing, and then it adhered to the top flap. And I'm just going to do what we did before. Hello, Lisa. Glad you could join us. Let's just move this eraser my way. And there's the front of page 1 done. How simple is that? And yet it gives you lots of interest. You got some flaps. Voila, done. So the back of page 2, page 2 and the front of page 3 mirror each other. So they're exactly the same. So we'll start with one side, but the measurements are the same for both sides. And in the cutting guide, I gave you first page 1 back, and then I gave you page 3 front. And yes, I did give you separate measurements, but that's okay. I have it all sitting here as one great big package. So I'm going to give you I'm going to tell you how many to cut all at one time for the back of page 2 and the front of page 3. I hope this is making sense and I'm not confusing anybody. So our first measurement is we need a piece of cardstock, and I'm using the Artisan Craft that measures 8 by 10. You need 2 of them. I scored at 1/2 and 5 1/2. And on this 8-inch side, as I said in the cutting guide, it's just a shy less than 8. So I say a 16th. It's even like a a 32nd. You know, it's just shave off just a little bit, like 8 less a hair, if that makes sense. Hello, Miss Jennifer. Oh, Tomalee, yes, we will be thinking about you and sending all kinds of positive energy your way. Yes. So we need 2 of these. And then we need our strips. So what do I got going on here? So these are the bands. So on the back of page 1, what we've got going on is we've got a little belly band, and it opens and it opens and it opens. So that first measurement I gave you was this section. Okay. So now I'm going to talk about these strips and the band and the little flip that's inside. Hello, Miss Jennifer. How are things at your house this afternoon? Or do I ask? All right. So we need, I believe we need 4 of these. So we're going to use 4 for the back of page 1 and the front of page 2. And these 4 measure 2 by 4.5. And on the 4.5 inch side, you're going to score at 1/2 on each of them. Okay. Oh, good. Good. I'm glad to hear that. And then to actually make the closure, which is the band in the instructions, it measures 1.5 by 5. And you're going to score at 1 1/2, 1 5/8. And then you are going to score at, hold on here. I think I'm working on the wrong side. Give me a second here just to, okay, let me try those score lines again, because I was looking at my instructions going, those are wrong. So let's start again. So on the 5-inch side, you are going to score at 1 1/4, 1 3/8, 3 3/8, and 3.5. Okay. And then you need 2 of these cute little flaps. You need to find a place to put this over here. And they measure 4 1/4 by 4 3/4. And on the 4 3/4 side, I scored at 1/2 on each of them. Okay. Just going to set that there. So I need 1 of these little guys. I need 1 of the big ones. I need 1 closure or band. And I need 2 strips. It's like a recipe. So let's burnish all those score lines. Doesn't matter which one you start with. And I usually just kind of, with these little bands, I kind of keep turning it around so that it's easy for me to fold, because there's only 1/8 of an inch between, because this is what you're creating. You're creating that little band thing that's going to go around the 2 strips you're creating to make the closure. So again, and I usually try to keep it lined up with the rest of the band. Sometimes it doesn't, and then I have to, you know, use my scissors to trim something. Those things happen. So there's our band. See, just like so. And then let's do our small piece. And let's do this really big one. So let's do the 1/2 inch score line first. And then just looking here. We're going to turn it over and we're going to fold that other score line inside, like so. So there's the 1/2 inch tab that we're going to adhere to the base page. So I folded the rest, that other score line that was at what, 5 1/2 in on itself. And that's the nice thing about the Artisan, because you can do this kind of thing. Now, because this flap, bring the book back in, because this flap, which is this flap, goes from the top of the page to the bottom of the page, I'm going to miter my 1/2 inch tabs. Thank you. I had them done yesterday, and you know what? I really like them too, Lisa. Little, kind of Valentine, but classy Valentine. Thank you. I will tell Tatum that. That's the young lady who does my nails for me. All right, so there is our mitering. I'm also going to round my flap. Yeah, I'm going to round my flap. So again, this is going on the right-hand base page. So it's going to open like so, and then my ends here are rounded. And I'm going to round the outside corners on this one. All right, so by the time I'm done today, those little pieces are going to be everywhere. I see that right now. All right, so let's do a little dry fit, because sometimes, and again, bring my little piece of white paper back in. So I do like to do some dry fitting just to make sure that I didn't cut something wrong. Not that I've ever done that in my life. More times than you ladies will ever know. I'm going to add some adhesive. And I'm probably going to turn the book here in a second. Maybe, maybe not. Pretty happy with what I see. Open it up. Get me something to just burnish a little bit. Make sure I'm not creating a huge mess. You know, with art glitter glue, it's almost less is more. And like I say, if you stick around to the very end, I'm going to show you kind of where I'm headed with my next project. All right, now I have to move my glue up here, move my water out of my way, scissors if I put them away. So this is the flap that I put on the left side of the base page. Now this little teeny tiny flap, it is going on the inside of that large flap we just put on, and I am centering it top to bottom, something like so. And again, you could probably put this flap wherever you want to put it. I wanted it on the inside because I thought it would be a great place to maybe journal about whatever photos are put on the inside of this flap. Give it a good burnish. Burnish. Now, you could use a magnet to hold this shut if you wanted to. Or, as I'm going to do in this case, I'm putting a band on this side of the page. And then I'm going to put a second band over on where the spine of the book is, or for where the gusset is, making sure I don't have it down in the gusset, because you still want to be able to to turn your page, right? And I'm going to round the corners on this band, or strips, as I called them in the cutting guide, after I have these strips down. So I'm just going to add some adhesive. I don't need to miter these. And the one I'm going to put, centering it kind of top to bottom. You could use a ruler and do it precisely. You could do like I'm doing today, and I'm just going to eyeball, making sure it's not hanging over. And burnish well. And then again, so once you have one on, the one that is going on the right-hand side of the page is much easier to put on because you have something to line it up to. So you could have burnished, or not burnished, but rounded those corners. I just chose not to. Remember, when you're constructing your album, it becomes yours. You can construct it any way you would like to. And I always like to turn my page. Nothing's going to be in the way. All right, now I am going to round these. So I'm going to have to maneuver the book. So this is why it's handy to do it before. In this particular case, for whatever the reason was, I decided I was going to round them after. All right. So there's your bands. And then what we're going to do is I'm just going to slide, let's put the book back in here, get rid of the paper. Just going to slide my band over the one side. And partly what I'm looking at here is to make sure it's not too tight, which it's not. It's snug, but as it's on, it will become, well, yes and no, Carolyn. In this application, I could have rounded them because I had enough hanging over that I could see. So it's 50 of one, half a dozen of the other sometimes, but you got to look at I look at every flap individually when I'm deciding to do that. And then sometimes I mess up and I don't. So we scored on all. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little adhesive to the back side of the band. And we want to keep this straight. So the longer piece, and you're kind of gonna take your burnishing tool and just carefully burnish that. I'll show you in a second what I was trying to make sure I didn't do. I want to make sure I kind of keep my square shape. Can you guys? Yes, you can. That I created with the 1/4 inch score lines, or 1/8 of an inch score lines. So all we're going to do is we're going to slide it on, and it is snug, but it will give over time, promise. And then this is going to go like so. Just give me a second, because you got to work it a little bit. And I'm going to just stretch this a little bit. So all I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of round them to give a little bit more space. Okay. And then let's try this again. There we go. And there is your band that is going to hold this flap shut. So we're just going to do the same thing on the second side. that's what it's all about, Caroline. That is what Tammy's design team is all about. It's about teaching. It's about giving you some ideas that you can take, and then in a project down the road, you get to incorporate them. You know, I'm sure that other people have said exactly what I said for the reasoning to round or not to round, but that's why how I do it. It's kind of, I decide sometimes to round and sometimes not to round. All right, so these are the flaps for the front of page 2, and I already gave you the measurements. So there was one that was 8 less a 16th or a hair by 10, and on the 10-inch side you scored at 1/2 and 5.5, and then when you burnish, remember you're folding that 5.5 score line in. So again, this is going to go on the right hand side page or the front of page 2. So here's your 1/2 inch score line and your tab that you're going to adhere it to the base page with. I'm going to miter this because it goes from the top of the page to the bottom of the page. There you go. Well, you're welcome. Glad I could help. And that's sometimes what happens. You hear things multiple times, and then all of a sudden one time it goes, ah, I get that. And then we have this little flap that 4 3/4 by 4 1/4, and on the 4 3/4 side you score at 1/2. So burnish that one. And then you've got your 2 strips, and they measure 2 by 4 1/2, and on the 4 1/2 inch side you scored at 1/2 on both of them. And the second one. And then that little band that we're going to be holding this close with, it measures 1/2 by 5, and on that 5 1/2, on that 5-inch side, you are going to score at 1/4, 1 3/8, 3 3/8, and 3 1/2, and then you're going to burnish those score lines. And the other one, I like this as a closure. It's just different than seam binding. It's more cost efficient than a magnet, and it just is a little bit of interest. And so far, I've never lost one. And I guess if you were really concerned about losing it, you could always permanently adhere it. Hello, Judy. Okay, so let's bring our book back in. And get my trusty piece of white paper, slide it underneath the front of page 2. We're going to start with the big flap first. So let's add our adhesive. And like I say, I did a walkthrough last week when we did part 1 of this construction. So if you want to go and see what this album looks like when it's finished, that walkthrough is over with part 1. I will try, after this uploads to YouTube, link the 2 pieces together, part 1 and part 2 together, in the description of both of them. And then remember, it'll eventually end up over on Scrapbookers in the guide, and it's guide 18 over on Scrapbookers. Or you can go to my Facebook group, which is All Things Paper by Bonnie, and you will find it there too. So I forgot to do some rounding of corners, so we're going to do it now. Using the 3/8 of an inch corner rounder, or whatever size you like. Maybe you don't want to round any corners, and that is fine too. Let's round this little flap before I adhere it because it just makes it easier. And we're going to round these ones now too. We have sunshine here today. Hello, Miss Patricia. How are you this fine Friday? We have gorgeous weather here today. Absolutely gorgeous. We've had sunshine for like 4 days in a row and really mild temperatures, which is awesome. Maybe winter is over. Okay, so I've noticed that this page isn't as straight as I would have liked it to have been. So I'm going to try and remedy my problem, and if it works, I'll tell you what I did. So all I've done is I just sort of rescored it a little bit, and I just held it to the bottom of the page, white paper back in. I held it to the bottom of the page, and then I just took my burnishing tool and I just ran it down this seam again, or this score line again, because I didn't like the way it was just kind of too short on the page and it was too high up here. All right, so let's open this all the way up. And I'm going to again center this. You do whatever you'd like to do with this flap, but I'm going to center mine top to bottom. Add adhesive on that 1/2 inch score line. And again, just kind of eyeballing. And we've almost got the front of page 2 finished. This album does come together quite quickly, which is kind of nice. So it's something that doesn't make a beautiful wedding album, I think. Even a baby album will be good. Now, this time, when I'm adhering my bands, I am going to use the band that I adhered on the back of page 1 as a guide, because I want my bands to be roughly in the same place. Add some adhesive, and you're adhering this one side of the band to the base page, making sure it's not going to cause a problem with turning the page. Handy dandy little short ruler. There you go. And the second half of this band is going to be going over on the right-hand side of that flap that you attached. You know, the one that goes all the way out. But I'm using the band on the left-hand side of the page as my guide to put the band on that's going on the right-hand side of the page. Let's add some adhesive. You too, Caroline. All right. So line it up, that it's straight, which it is now. It's a nice thing about glue. It gives you that second to line everything up. And there we go. And now we're going to make our closure. So this is that little closure that we made, and we did our scoring, and then we folded on all those score lines. And so we're just going to square this, making sure. And then quickly, before it dries too much, let's get the book back in here. Slide it on. Yeah, we're going to be just fine. I just like to try it because you still got a second or two that you can adjust things. All right. Should be good. Now I'm going to burnish that down. Now, if this little overhang bugs you, you can take your scissors and give it a slight haircut. At least I think I can give it a slight haircut. It's just a teeny tiny little bit. It might not bother you at all. It might be more trouble than it's worth. Or you might be able to do like I'm going to do right now and hopefully fix it. All right. So slide our little band on for a closure. And slide the other one in behind. We're going to have to work this one just like we did on the other side. Right now it's tight, but if you work it, and like I said about the other side, if you just round it a little bit, so I might take my pokey tool and bring it in and just give this a slight little round. That sometimes helps too if you're finding it's really tight. I do too. It's just, I like it because, like I say, it saves. This one's a little tight, but it'll be fine after it's worked itself. It's probably one of my favorite little closures. So there's the front of page 1, back of page 1, front of page 2, back of page 2, or front of page 2. And now we're to the back of page 2. And we've got some things for this. I'm gonna flip my original. All right, so we got a couple things going on here. I did use, where is it? Sorry for my arm reaching up like that. I use this wonderful album tags and accent. Use this tag here as a closure in this album. So it's this one right here. I love it. So I cut 2 of those out. We're just going to set them aside. Now, if you don't have this tag die, and it's not something that's possible, basically these tags are 6 by 4 or 4 by 6. So you could cut 2 4x6s and achieve the same goal. I just like it because it gives a little interest. And we'll do the rest of the measurements for this. So I have, with the right piece, I have a flap that measures 4 by 8, less a hair. And on the 4-inch side, I scored at 1/2. Hello, Nancy. And then we have a pocket that is going to go on top of this flap. And it measures 3.5 by 9, less a hair. And on this one, you're on the 3.5-inch side, you are going to score at 1/2. Rotate it to the 9-inch side, score at 1/2. Rotate it completely to the other end of the 9-inch side and score at 1/2. And then we have 2 flaps. No, we have one flap that measures 5.5 by 7. And on the 5.5-inch side, I scored at 1/2. And then we have a second flap that measures 5 by 7. And on the 5-inch side, I scored at 1/2. So let's burnish all these score lines. One score line. Two score lines. Now, this is the 8-inch flap, so I am going to miter the 1/2-inch tab. And then we're going to create our pocket. So burnish all those score lines. Last score line, and then we're going to do some mitering on the pocket. So the first thing I do is where my 2 lines intersect, I am going to cut, as I call it, straight through. I think you can see it there, the X. And that's just to get rid of some bulk. And then over to this side. Okay, and the top of the pocket. And of course, I didn't move that phone today. And my husband got it, so that's a good thing. So let's re-burnish the pocket. Sometimes I remember to take that phone out of my room, and sometimes I forget, but that's alive for you. All right, let's bring the book back in. And we are going to start with that flap that measured 4 by 8 less a hair. And it is going on the left-hand side of the back of page 2, like so. My piece of white paper fell on the floor, so let's pick it up. And let's adhere this flap down first. Now, you could build your pocket on it if you wanted to, but today I'm going to do it this way. So I just want to make sure that I have it right over on the edge of the page. For some reason, something is not. There we go. So why does my page not seem like it's straight? But it was. Give it a good burnish. And remember, it's just slightly smaller than your base page. Now, the pocket we created, so that was the piece that measured 3.5 by 9. And it goes on top of the flap you just adhered. So the pocket goes on top of that flap, centering top to bottom, which it should be the full length of it, and side to side. And we'll add our adhesive just to the one flap. So I'm adding the adhesive only to the flap, the long flap that's going to run the length of the page. And I'll explain why. And for those of you that have watched my tutorials before, you know what's coming next, maybe. Just making sure that I'm not overhanging, but I have gone to the edge of that flap. Something is, there we go. And open and give it a good burnish. And then what I like to do, get my tape out here, is I just take some cello tape and I just like to put it on that seam, that 1/2 inch tab, because then when you're sliding whatever in and out of the pocket, it doesn't get in the way. We might have to cut a piece because it looks like I didn't cut one thing for this. I gave you the measurements, but I didn't do the cutting for it. Oh, all right. Don't know what I was thinking, but I obviously was not thinking. That's okay. All right, so now let's add our adhesive to the 1/2-inch tab for the top, or the sides of the pocket, I guess is what I should call it. And burnish. Right, and I'm going to round my corners on the flap. Could have done this before, but I chose to do it now. There we go. Let's give this another good burnish. All right, and so what we're going to do is then you had 2 flaps. One is a little smaller. So you have one that after that you had a piece that was 5.5, and the other one was 5. So the piece that is 5 inches wide, it is going to go on that base page, but on the right-hand side of the base page. So I'm going to add it first, centering it top to bottom. And I'm just going to turn my book. And top to bottom. Making sure we can still, yeah, turn the, no, we can't. That's not going to be straight. Okay, let's try that one more time. There we go. So give this a good burnish. And then we're going to do this other side. And we're going to use our flap that is on the right-hand side of the base page is what we're going to line up to. Again, keeping in mind, yep. So like I said to you, I forgot. I'm just going to check my little bin here to the side in case something got pulled apart, but I'm not seeing that. So just give me a second. So we're adding that 5.5-inch flap to the left-hand side of the pocket that we just put on. So once I get this adhered, I'll show you where we're at. So this also has a magnet closure. You could have used seam binding, but I chose the magnet closure. And I'm rounding those corners. We'll do our magnet closure next. There we go. All right, so here's what we've got. We've got the flap that opens to the right, that's adhered to the base page. We've got a flap that opens to the left that's adhered to that pocket we made. There's a pocket, and then we have another flap. Now, I need, Yeah, I don't know what I was thinking. All right, give me 1 second because I just need to get out a piece of cardstock to make a pocket. So we're going to just pull this out of the way for a second. Bring in my small cutter because I need a pocket that measures 2. And my big dolly has a whole bunch of stuff sitting on it right now because that's what I did before this lie. Okay, and we want it to be 2 by 5.5. 2 by 5.5. Just give me 1 second. Yes, because the pocket is 4.5. That's right. So just less than 5.5. Little hair. And then we're going to do some scoring and some burnishing. Like I say, when it's live, you get to see when I forget to cut a piece. And we're going to score on the 2-inch side at 1/2. Rotate to the 5.5-inch side, score at 1/2. And then I like to rotate it completely around. So we're still on the 5.5-inch side, and I score again at 1/2 when I'm doing pockets. And that way, when I've done that less a 16th, I still get the proper size of pocket I want. And that little 16th that's to not let things overhang still functions the way I want it to. Hope that makes sense. So again, we're going to cut through that X like we always do. And we're going to miter the top of those 1/2-inch tabs. And then I always like to give my pockets a burnish after I do all that mitering and cutting. Bring our album back in. So this pocket is going on the front of the flap that is on this right-hand side. I rounded the bottom of this flap or the side of this flap. So I am actually, and that's what I like about these corner chompers because you can do this. I am going to round the one side of my pocket. So it does leave a little hole. So if you don't like the little hole, you might not want to do this and then don't round any of your corners. So I'm just going to do a little dry fit quickly. And yes, get my paper. So I just find when I have the piece of white paper underneath my cardstock, it just makes it easier for me to see. Hello, Miss Peggy. Glad you could join us today. We're almost halfway finished. Well, not quite, but getting close. And what's our time? Oh, we're just into an hour. That's pretty good. We'll be done in another hour. We'll be done in less than an hour. Well, let's wait and see, right? What mischief can I get myself into today? Okay, and again, I'm just going to take a little piece of tape because this just lets your tags slide in and out of its pocket. And we're going to add adhesive to the 1/2-inch tabs. And this guy over here. And fold it up. And burnish. And Nancy, I don't know if I said hello to you, but hello. All right, so there's that pocket. Now we need some magnets. So another set of large magnets. I believe I only used 2 in this whole project because I used the seam binding for all my other closures. You know, the seam binding I still have sitting up here, and they're going, when's she going to use that? Soon. I always wonder why they're put in so hard, the magnets. So you'd think it was gold. All right. So our first magnet is going to be adhered to the base page. And I'm going to put that one down first because I want it to not be under my pocket, because that's just more layers that the magnet has to grab through. So it's going to be closer to the right-hand side of the base page. So just get my little picky tool. And I just want to see, yeah, we're going to be fine. What I was wondering about is how close I was to that other magnet on the front of page 1. It might not have much pull, but you just never know. Like there. And we're going to use a little adhesive. Let's move these guys. This guy down. And so I want the other half of this magnet to adhere to, I'm just going to see something. I'm going to change what I was going to do. I did not adhere it to the base page. As I was doing that, I was going, I don't think that's what I did this time. It's okay. That's why it's artisan. You can do this. I adhered it to the front of the flap that was on the left-hand side. Put there. And make sure we got our adhesive over top of it. And like so. Except I need to add a little adhesive. It's got a bit of paper on it now. So all I did is I just took a piece of square tape, added it to the back of the magnet, and that'll help hold it in its place. So far I didn't break it, but I came close. Keep it up there. All right. That was my corner chomper hitting the floor. Hopefully I didn't break it. I don't think I did. Everybody's so quiet today. All right, so there's that closure. There's the 2 tags that are going in this front pocket. And then the only thing I didn't score or didn't cut out, which I'll go back and do after I'm done my live, is I have a 10.5 by 7.25 booklet that's going to go in this pocket. And on the 10.5-inch side, I scored it 10.25. So I'm not going to bore you with that because you guys all know how to do that. Okay, and I probably have another booklet further on in this book that I can show you how I did that. But you guys already know that. So it's all good. So there is the back of page 2. So we've got 2 more pages and then the front and inside cover. So on the back of on the front of page 3, here's what we have. It's one of those days, is it? I thought I had this all organized. Oh well, we'll work on it as we go. All right, so on the front of page 3, you need 2 pieces of cardstock that measure 6 by 12. And you're going to score it 1/2, 4.5, and 8.5. I'd rather not have a page cut. It's in the cutting guide. I just forgot to cut mine. And we're going to do that to both of those pages or flaps. We are going to burnish on all the score lines. We are going to remember that we have seam binding to put down. So I am going like so. I'm going to go like so. So the very front flap is about a 1/2 inch shorter. So it goes like, so this is the flap that's going to be on the right-hand side of the base page. So it folds back on itself and then forward on itself. And then the other flap, let's burnish those score lines. So it goes back on itself. And that's the nice thing about Artisan, is you can be this rough with it. You know what, Tomalee? This album holds a lot of pictures because this album is a, bring it in. The cover of this album is 8.5 by 6.5. So it is a really nice size. Like I say, it'd make a beautiful baby album, a beautiful wedding album. It's got lots of flips and flaps in it. It's something I like in my albums. So of course, that's how I created it, with flips and flaps. Like so. So we're gonna miter, not miter, round the outside flap on both of these. So when you have it all laid out, what we're rounding is this far side. So there's the 1/2 inch tab over here. We are rounding this side. We're not going to put my corner rounder near the side of my desk, because when it falls on the floor, that's when things break. Give it another burnish. And remember, seam binding. All right, so I'm going to add my seam binding next. And what I like to do is I like to use about 12 to 24 inches of seam binding. So I have enough to play with for closures. It would be a beautiful baby album, Tomalee. Absolutely beautiful. And then I'm just going to kind of cut it in half, give or take. And I am going to center my seam binding. And I'm adding it to the base page before I'm adding these two flaps, okay? And I'm going to get my score tape. So I find the end. Thought I was organized, but obviously something I'm missing. I'm missing some flaps for a page. There's a theme here. Now, if you really want to center it, so I'm going to give you an OCD lesson right now. If you really want to center it, I know that this page is 8. And because I have this beautiful Tim Holtz ruler that has a 0 in the middle of it, I can do something like this. So I just center my ruler. And then I'm just putting a little mark, so I'm going to see it, so I can put my seam binding down in the center of the page. Now, if it doesn't bother you, just put it in place. Okay, so we're just going to add our seam binding. So when I add the seam binding, I make sure my raw edge is facing in to the middle of my base page. You should see the floor, because I just keep dropping things on the floor. At the end of one of these tutorials, I have to vacuum my floor. Now, because one flap is going to the top of the page and one flap is going to the bottom of the page, if you find it easier to miter both of the 1/2 inch tabs on the flaps, do that. Or you can just miter one. It gets down to kind of what you want. Oh, and I didn't say goodbye to Tina when she left, but I understand. Those things happen. Hello, is it Elba? Nice that you could join us today. We're halfway finished putting our flips and flaps on this album today, but it does stay recorded. So add your adhesive to the 1/2 inch flap, 1/2 inch tab, I should say. Making sure that the 1/2 inch tab you're adding to the left-hand side of the page isn't going to interfere with the closing mechanism. Someplace. Garnish. Put away. My desk doesn't get too crazy. And then let's do the bottom flap. And we can have this flap out of our way. And again, I'm using the edge of the page. Let's move this up a bit. I'm using the edge of the page, making sure I'm not going over or I'm not hanging over the bottom of the page. You could move these flaps up higher on the page. You could have them in the middle of the page. You could do almost whatever you want. Now, the reason I use this brown seam binding is because the paper that I'm going to decorate this particular folio with is, or this album with, is got some brown tones in it. So I'm not doing two of the same. Never do two of the same. So there's the front of page 3. Now we're going to the back of page 3, and we're going to have to do some cutting because what I missed is I missed a piece of paper that needed to be cut at 3 by 7 because it has a pocket, or has a pocket and a couple of flaps. So I'm going to need a bigger piece too. Need that one. All right, so let's cut this one at 3 by 7. I'm just using some scraps right now. And like I said to you, my dolly is buried over on the other side of the room here. So we're just going to do it this way. 3 by 7. And I'm going to say like less a 16th. Like less a hair, because can you guys see? There's the 7, and I'm just pulled it back just ever such a little bit. Hope you guys can see that. And then we're going to cut the other right now too, and then I'll do the scoring. So I need 2 flaps that are 4 3/4 by 6. So 4 3/4. So there's 4 3/4 by 6. So I know this is a 12-inch piece of paper, so I'll just cut it in half. And there they are. Okay. So these flaps and this pocket are in my cutting guide. I just forgot to cut them. I don't know what I was thinking. Who knows? That's life. So this pocket, we're going to do the scoring. So let's get rid of our board. On the 3-inch side, I'm scoring at 1/2. Like I say, this is what happens in a live. Turning to the 7-inch side, and I'm scoring at 1/2. Completely turning to the other side, and scoring at 1/2. So there's the pocket. And then for these 2 flaps that are 4 3/4 by 6, on the 6-inch side, I'm scoring at 1/2. And bring in our scoreboard again, or our cover. Let's move that over here. So let's burnish all these score lines. And our pocket. And then we're going to miter these 1/2-inch tabs because they're going right at the top of the page. So it's just easier to do both sides so I don't have to worry about it as I'm tearing them down. So miter, and then let's miter our pocket. So cutting through the X, so getting rid of that bulk. And then miter the top of the pocket, that 1/2-inch tab. And then get that out of our way. And that's where these 2 little tags come in. That's what's going to hold things shut. We're going to make use of tags again. And like I said, these 2 tags come off of the Albums and Tags Accents Heartfelt Creation that Tammy has in the store. Or you could cut a piece of cardstock at 4 by 6 and slide them in the pocket. So the pocket is going at the bottom. So we're at the back of page 3, and our pocket is at the bottom of the base page. And we want to keep it as far to the left as possible so it's not going to be in the way of turning the page. All right, so here we go. Here, this, I'm sure we're not hanging over the bottom of the page like I am right now. That's why I like using the Dries Clear Art Glitter Glue, because it gives you that second to maneuver things if you need to. And a little piece of tape over that bottom 1/2-inch tab so that your tags will slide in and out without catching on it. And then we're just going to turn our page, making sure everything is working. Nothing's in the way. Adhesive on the 1/2-inch side tabs. Do the left one and the right one. Okay. Fold them up. And burnish. Okay, now our 2 flaps that measured 6 by 4 3/4, they're going at the top of this base page. One is going on the left-hand side, one is going on the right-hand side. And I did round the corners. So now I've turned the book upside down. I'm going to round my corners on these flaps. Okay, it's just easier sometimes to do it before you adhere them in the book. Doesn't matter which side I start with, but I am going to get my piece of white paper, add adhesive to the 1/2-inch tab, like so, and adhere it down like so. Don't let it overhang the edge of the base page. Okay, and then to line up the one that's, so if I turn the book back around, so the one that is on the right-hand side of the base page, you don't want it to get in the way of turning of that base page. I'm just going to flip my book back to its side so I can see. Move this up a little bit so you guys can see. Everything looks good. Add some adhesive to the 1/2 inch tab. And use that first flap you put down as your guide. And before it has time to make sure to adhere, just double check that when you close it, the page is going to turn. Burnish. And there is the back of page 3. Let's get our white piece of paper out of the way so you guys can see. And then these 2 little tags that you can add seam binding to the top of if you wanted to, are what's going to hold that flap, those flaps closed. So there you manage to not have to use a magnet again by using something in a pocket to hold some flaps closed. All right, so now, move that back over. We are to the front of page 4. Hopefully, everything else is correct. All right, so for the front of page 4, we need a few things. Actually, this is a really easy one because it's just a small pocket that's going to go on the left-hand side of the page with a booklet in it. Let's do our measurements. So we have a piece that measures 2.5 by 9, less a 1/16, or less a hair. And on the 2-inch side, you're going to score at 1/2. Rotate to the 9-inch side, score at 1/2, and then turn it completely around and score at 1/2. And again, the reason I turn it completely around is, remember, I cut this piece just a hair less than 9, but I still want my 1/2 inch tab on both sides. So let's burnish those score lines. And let's cut where we need to cut. So we're going to cut through the X on the pocket. Don't cut into, if you're afraid that you're going to cut into the actual pocket, cut to the, I'm going to call this a little square. Cut more to the square side of that fold line. But I tend to cut straight through, and because I do a fair number of pockets, it's like anything else. The more you create, the more comfortable you are at what you're doing. Okay. And burnish this again. Right, and then the booklet that's going to go in that pocket, it measures 7.5 by 11, and I scored at 5.5. And we're going to fold on that score line and burnish. I did round the corners on the booklet. And I believe Just gonna look here for a second. That booklet that I forgot to cut, it is a slightly different size. So the booklet that went, back us up just a second. So that booklet that went in, so the back of page 2 into this pocket here, it slides in this way. So that's what still needed to go in here that I have to go back and cut, is a booklet for this. But this booklet is going over here on the front of page 4. So let's have our book in here. We're just going to do a quick dry fit to make sure everything is going to fit the page. Nothing's hanging over. Bring in this piece of white paper. And if you follow me, you know that I typically do use my white piece of paper to help me see where I want to lay things. Remember, if you haven't already done so, make sure to go back and like this tutorial over on my Facebook group. It is All Things Paper by Bonnie. And if you haven't subscribed, I'd really appreciate it if you did. All right. No, it's crooked. Let's try this again. There we go. So I'm going to turn my page just to make sure nothing's in the way, and it's not. And I keep my little pocket slightly up from the bottom of the page, or from the edge of the page that was at the base page. Just because you don't want it to have it that it's not going to turn smoothly, your page. And sometimes the pocket will add a little bulk. And if you're really worried about that, you could always put your pocket over on the right-hand side of the page. And let's move you up here. So I'm getting some tape. And it's just so my booklet will slide in smoothly. Add adhesive to the 1/2-inch tab at the top of the page and at the bottom of the page. And then fold it up and burnish. All right. And then our booklet slides neatly into our pocket. Now, I just want to see something here. Making sure that my booklet is going all the way to the bottom. What I'm doing is I'm just making sure I don't have any glue that's going to stick the pocket down, and then this booklet won't slide in the way I want it to slide in. There we go. And the reason I knew I had an issue is it was right up here at the top, at this side of the base page, and I went, no, it should be just a little bit smaller. So I just was double checking that everything was good, and it is. And sometimes when you first put a booklet into a pocket, it is a little tight, but as time goes on, it'll loosen up a little bit. Okay, so we're now to the back of page 4. So we're almost done. And this is a real simple 2 flaps and some seam binding. So we're going to do our seam binding first so I don't forget. No, yes. All right, so I'm going to get another 24 inches of seam binding, give or take. 12 inches, and then another piece that's about that same length. I use my scoreboard to do my measuring. It's a guesstimate. Now, I am only going to add my seam binding to the right side of my base page. because the seam binding that's going on the left side is actually going on the flap that we're going to be putting down. So we're going to talk about flaps in a second, but we're going to first put on this seam binding so we don't forget. That's my one reason for not wanting to wait too long, because I get talking and then I discover I forgot to add the seam binding and some tape. So I'm just going to lay this piece of tape down, not right at the edge of the page. You just want it in a little bit. Lift off the backing, but this backing we're not going to get rid of. And remember, we always add our seam binding with the raw edge to the middle of the project in most cases. Something like that. Just going to cover it back up so it's not going to get in my way, or I'm not going to have something stick to it. All right, so let's talk about the flaps. We have two flaps. The larger flap measures 5 by 6 3/4. And on the 5-inch side, we score at 1/2. The smaller flap measures 4 by 5, and we score at 1/2 on the 5-inch side. Hello, Donna. Glad you could join us. I'm getting everything crowded here. What else is new? Burnish on my score lines. I'm going to round my corners on my flaps. And burnish them again. Finish. Bring our booklet, our album back in. White piece of paper. So I centered the larger flap on the left-hand side of the base page, like so. Add some adhesive. You don't have to miter this these half-inch tabs or the half-inch tab, because it's not going from the top of the page to the bottom of the page. Something like so. Kind of measuring side to side, top to bottom, I should say. And when this is done, we only have the front inside cover and the back inside cover. And then our smaller flap is going at the top of the page with the same idea, that we're just bringing it in about 1/2 inch, give or take, wherever you like to put your flap. Because remember, your book. Remember, the paper collection I used for this project is Love Letters. It's exclusive. I'm just going to turn my whole book around so I can see what I'm looking at. It's exclusive to Country Craft Creations. It is to die for. It is made it is printed on Bristol, which is just a beautiful texture. It is absolutely gorgeous. So remember, it's at countrycraftcreations.com. Collection is Love Letters, and it's exclusive to Country Craft Creations. All right, so now that other piece of seam binding that we cut at 12 inches, we are going to take a piece of tape, and I am going to add it to this flap we put on the left-hand side of the base page, making sure I keep it in a bit from the edge, so about 1/8 inch, give or take. I'm going to remove it. And then I'm going to line up my seam binding with the other piece of seam binding that I put on the base page. Now, as you can see, I'm putting my seam binding to the inside of this flap because I don't want the frayed edge to stick out from underneath the pattern paper once it is put on. And then we're just going to tie this like so. This one's a little long, but that's okay. You can trim it up after. And there's your closure. So we're going to go back to the front of this book. So that's all 4 pages, have all their flips and flaps. Must remember to cut that one booklet I still need to cut. And I'm done, well, not quite, but close enough. Done with that. Now, on the front inside cover, where you've made, bring the book in here, flip it to the front. This is what went in inside on the front inside cover. It is a flap that opens, lots of room for pictures, and it has a seam binding closure. Now, the only thing you need to remember is we're not going to actually adhere this little booklet to the inside front cover until after you put the pattern paper on it. But I like to make it and then it's ready to roll. So it measures, we have 2 pieces to make this little booklet. So the one piece measures 6.5 by 9. You're scoring at 1/2 and 4 3/4. The second part of this booklet also measures 6.5, but on the 8.5-inch side, you are only scoring at 4 1/4. So let's do our folding on those score lines. And fold that score line, little 1/2-inch tab. Now, what we're going to do is, so our booklet is going into the book with this being adhered to the front inside cover, something like so. Then this smaller piece, the one that didn't have a 1/2-inch tab, it gets adhered to this 1/2-inch tab that's on the first flap, like so. And that's what's going to make your booklet. So I hope that makes sense. So let me get this out here again. So we have our longer piece, our piece that measured 9. So it's going to lay like so. Give all of those score lines a really good burnish because we want this as flat as we possibly can make it. I am not going to miter this 1/2-inch tab, and I'll show you why in a second. And then our smaller piece, the one that measured 8.5, because remember these 2 are both 6.5 long, burnish that score line. Well, thank you, Tomalee. That is a die I have had forever. And I said in part 1, remember when Sally says to us, go and forage to find things for our junk journals and things like that? Go forage through your dies and your stamps. You'll be amazed at what you discover. So that's what I did. I went looking for anything that sort of was about love, or I thought it was about love. And that's how I chose the dies that I cut out with the black paper. Now, here's our 1/2-inch tab. Here's our other flap that measures 8.5. No mitering of the 1/2-inch tab. I am adding adhesive to that 1/2-inch tab as soon as I can get my glue from being plugged. There we go. And remember, I said you needed to stick around to the end because I've got something to show you what I'm working on. So I'm going to flip my whole scoreboard around, partly so that it's not in your way, but it's closer to me because I do use my scoreboard as just another tool. So there's my 1/2 inch tab facing up. Here is my other flap that I scored, and I'm lining it up with that 1/2 inch tab. And I'm just making sure I'm not going over the edge. Give this a good burnish. And now I have that beautiful little flip-flop zigzag book that we are going to be adding to our front inside cover. Now, I am wrapping seam binding around it. So I'm going to get a generous piece of seam binding here. So I'm probably taking a little bit more than 24 inches, maybe 2.5 feet, something like that. Whatever I think is adequate. And I am just going to center that piece of seam binding and wrap it around the back. I am going to use some dry adhesive to hold my seam binding in place. You could use glue. I find it takes a little too long for the glue to dry, so I prefer to do it this way. If you want to measure it, we know it's 6.5, so about 3 1/4, give or take. I'm just kind of eyeballing. Remove the backing. And then all I'm going to do is I'm going to take this piece of seam binding, kind of get the center of it, try to center it, and I'm laying it down on that tape. And then I'm just going to tie it. And it's a little long right now, but after you've cut it and you've tied your ends, it'll all work. I'm adding some repositionable tape to the back of this. And then remember, after I put my pattern paper down, then I am going to adhere this booklet to this front inside cover. And you end up with your flip-flop little booklet. And I like to skew it so it's not straight, just something different for your eyes to see. And so that's what's going on the front inside cover. You know what, Tomalee? You're going to love your Big Shot. I love my dies. I use them all the time. I know there's people out there that go Cricut all the way, but I love my dies. I don't know. I guess I like my stuff. That's part of it. So let's move to the back inside cover. And the back inside cover has a set of pockets. So they're stacked pockets. One at the bottom and then a band. And then you have a booklet going in that deep pocket. So it goes, this deep pocket goes right to the bottom of the inside cover. And these are 3x4 cut aparts that I just cut up. So let's get what we need to create that. So here's our 3. Let's turn our scoreboard back around. So we have 3 of these little photo mats that measure 3 1/4 by 4 1/4. You're going to round those corners. I'm going to repeat that times 3. I'm not going to do it on camera because you guys know how to do that. So I would do that to all 3 of those mats if that was what I was going for. And then we have 2, a pocket and a strip or band. So the pocket measures 3 1/2 by 7 1/2. So that's just, do like a hair less than 7.5. And you're going to, on the 3.5-inch side, score at 1/2. Turn your piece of paper to the 7.5-inch side, score at 1/2. Rotate it completely around to the other side and score at 1/2. And then the band, again, you know what, Tomalee? I know they say crickets are easy to use, but I agree. And it's probably because I just haven't tried to use mine enough. Probably, like, I know like Tanya uses hers all the time. She loves it. Lynn uses hers all the time. She loves it. Jennifer uses hers all the time. She loves it. Mine just ends up being a dust collector. But then I had dies first. Maybe that's part of the issue. And that's why we have options, right? So the band, it measures 2 3/4 by 7.5, and again, less a hair. You're going to score it 1/2 on one end, on the 7.5-inch side, and 1/2 at the other end. So let's burnish those score lines. So this is the band. And I keep saying I'm going to learn how to use my Cricut. I'm going to use my Cricut. The time it takes me to find an image, I can go over to my die wall or die bookshelf, because I keep my dies and stamps together, and I can find the die I'm looking for, because I have all my dies sort of labeled into, backgrounds, and I have some that say birthdays and babies, like whatever the themes are that I like to use. So let's cut our pocket. So remember that square that we created down at the bottom of the pocket? You cut through the X. And then we're going to miter the top of this pocket, like so. And we're going to burnish this again. And then I like to miter my band. Again, it's preference. So I just miter the top and the bottom of it. Get that out of my way. And then the booklet that's going inside this pocket, the one that goes from the top of the top pocket down to the bottom, it measures 7.5 by 11. And on the 11-inch side, we are scoring at 5.5. And I'm going to burnish that. I like to round the corners on my booklets because it just makes it slide in and out a bit easier. I could do them both at the same time, but I find doing them separately works a little better for me. Okay, let's bring the booklet back in. We're going to start with the pocket that goes on the bottom. So here's the bottom of my back inside cover. Here's the pocket that's going on the back inside cover. And what I like to do is I like to have my pocket right over on the right-hand side of the inside back cover. I'm going to add adhesive only to the bottom of the pocket. And it here. Don't want it hanging over the bottom of the inside cover or the side of the inside cover. Like so. And I'm just checking something. Just checking to make sure my book will close. I'm getting some adhesive, some tape, and I'm just putting it on the bottom. Like so. we're going to add adhesive, the liquid adhesive to the 1/2-inch tabs on the pocket. And I'm just going to fold this up. And I don't know where I learned to make pockets like this, these stacked pockets. I know Tammy makes a version of a stacked pocket. This could be that version. I can't remember right now. So burnish that bottom pocket. But I'm sure I saw it someplace along my journey. Now, that little band that you created, that band that was 2.5 inches wide, I butt that band right up to the pocket. And what I'm looking at here is to make sure that it's not going to get in the way of the cover closing. So I adhere one side first. So I'm going to adhere to the outside of the right-hand side. And I'm lining it up with the pocket. Burnish. There we go. And then, just to make sure, let's close our booklet before, yeah, we're going to be fine. So just bring it over to this other side. Now, when I close or pull the band over, what I see is I'm off just a teeny tiny little bit, like a hair. So I'm going to try to refold this score line. I'm just going to put my book like so. Hopefully this is going to work. So I'm just sort of pushing in on that score line just a touch. There we go. Now I'm happier. So we're going to add adhesive to the back of that 1/2-inch tab. Lay it down, smooth it over, like so. Make sure you can close your book, which we can. And then what we're going to do is, remember our booklet? It goes all the way to the bottom, like so. And then your little photo mats, you can tuck after you've rounded all their corners, if that's what you choose to do, like so. And we finished the construction on the Love Letter album. So I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. If you caught me on part 2, go back and check out part 1, because this is the walkthrough, or this is the album I created. And I did a walkthrough at the beginning of part 1. I'm not going to do a complete walkthrough, but kind of where we're going. And my bands were just as tight in this album when I started, and they're now much looser. Pocket. And this has seam binding that keeps it closed. So go back to the part of part 1 to see the walkthrough, and there we go. Now for the surprise, or for the what's coming next. So I got, let me see, this, and hang on a second, I've got to get the other piece of it. Here it is. In my last package, I ordered the Leafy Accent stamp and dies from Heartfelt that Tammy has in the store. You too, Tomalee. Good luck tomorrow. Thank you so much, and I'll be thinking about you, okay? You take care. We're going to learn how to do this. So basically, This was a white piece of paper when I started. I stamped it in the archival ink, and I believe I used the green library, green. You saw this mess I have over here. I used leaf green and library green to do my stamping, I stamped in the leaf green and then I inked the edges with the library green. And I didn't get it shaped yet, but that's my next thing. So we're going to be making some of these to be used as embellishments on our projects. So I hope you'll check that out, but that won't be next week. That will be the week after, because I'm away next week. So thank you so much for staying with me to the end. We will see you on my next live, and I hope you have an awesome weekend, and take care, everybody. Bye.